thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed, and welcome to Greece.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And John, I'd like to asking you, just to start by asking you if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Let's see. My name is John Wilson, and I live and work in Japan, Osaka, Japan. I teach at Kwansei Gakuin University, Kwansei Gakuin University. I've been in Japan for 7 years, teaching ESL. A little bit about my background. I have multiple degrees in English literature, and my field of expertise is in nonfiction prose writing. And I also did a certification in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I knew when I started college that I wanted to teach and work and study abroad, so that's what I did. And this is part of my professional development. I knew that I wanted to come to Greece someday, and I found out there was a conference here, and so here I am.
Great, and we're very lucky to have you. So I understand you've got a big idea about connecting institutions or schools around the world. Tell me what that is.
Yes, one of the courses that I was fortunate to teach was a course called Global Youth Culture, and in essence it's a virtual abroad course, and this course is taught with another university, San Jose State University in California. And Dr. Ruth Wilson and Dr. Yoko Baba were the lead on this project, and through funding in the United States government, the Department of Humanities, through collaborated online international learning, or COIL, they were able to secure grants and funding to allow that institution to find another institution in the world to collaborate and create a course with. And that's what we recently completed, a course that, I guess it was a preparatory course that is going to teach us for the real thing.
Okay, you said recently. How recently?
Just recently, as in December and January, we completed our first trial, December and January of 2011 and 2012.
And what's the aim?
One of the aims was to help students who are not necessarily able at this point in their college career to imagine what it would be like to travel abroad and study abroad without actually doing it. Also a way to connect with other youth, to internationalize the youth experience, learn more about culture, and bridge the gap between what it is to be and experience one's own culture and in youth, and know more about what it's like to experience another culture. And we're doing it, or we did it in such a way that on the San Jose State side, they were in their first language, they were in their L1 of English, and Japan was in their L2, which was also English. So it was an opportunity for two continents to share a similar language and learn about their cultures as well as other cultures throughout the world.
So what did they talk about? What did they, some ideas did they share?
Well, on a basic level, they shared who they were, so name, where they live, and that was noticing similarities and differences. When they talked about where they lived, in Japan it's very common for youth to live with their parents, and it's very common for them to commute 1.5, 2, 3 hours to campus each day, and using public transportation to do so. On the United States side, it's very common for students to live by themselves or in a roommate type of situation, and in many cases live closer to campus. So they were able to see the similarities, the differences in where they live, in their ages. There are some similarities and differences. The Japanese students were generally in the age of between 20 and 22. There was a wider range of the students from the United States, from 18 to, in some cases, maybe 27, 28. So they were able to see the similarities and differences. We talked about fashion, we talked about music, literature. It was just a wide range of topics that naturally would be topics of youth.
Sorry, can we go back to literature?
Sure.
What do you mean?
I guess one example is in Japan there is a type of literature called manga, which is basically comics, and it's a very large industry both in Japan and worldwide, and students on both sides are aware of manga because manga, I believe, started in Japan, but it's expanded, and also the translation of manga has changed from Japanese to the other countries' language. So we used manga as a way to connect the students, and I believe on the San Jose State side, students used manga to explore what it means from a Japanese perspective and how it is used. And then on the Japanese side, because they're familiar with it, they grow up with it, some as early as 7 or 8 or 9 years old. We explored the economic side of manga. One way that was done was through, how can I say, looking at manga as a textbook. What types of things do young learners learn through manga as a textbook? One of them is team sports, for example. Another is how to have a relationship, how to have a friend, how to be a friend. Those are some of the things that manga teaches people who read it. And manga is something that, 35, 40, 50-year-old men read manga comics in Japan. So it's an interesting topic, it's a viable topic, and it's something that both cultures tend to gain quite a bit from.
And you think that both sides were learning a great deal about each other's cultures. Does that tie in with something I've heard you talk about, which is your idea of global citizenship? And what do you mean by that?
Yes. I guess, first of all, what I mean by global citizenship is an awareness of the individual and where the individual's place in the world. So I guess it's such a broad topic, but I guess if I could as an educator can bring awareness to students about what is happening around the world and raise their awareness, if we use literature such as manga, if we're able to see how relationships work using manga, we can take manga as a topic and as literature and look at it and how we can see what we can learn from this literature. If I was reading a manga and I was learning about relationships, how could this help me where I am right now? As an educator, how could it help the students? How could it help students from San Jose see what relationships, and compare it to how they have their own relationships? Unique difference between, in general, the United States culture of youth and the Japanese culture is this sense of individualism in the United States and this sense of group orientation in Japan. And manga deals with those topics as well. A very famous saying in Japan is the nail that sticks his head up is very quickly hammered down. So, and students are very aware of that in Japan, almost to the point, if you ask a question like, what's your name? They might consult with their friends to get clear on that answer and then share their answer. I know it's kind of an extreme example, but
it's a good example.
It often happens that way.
Was there any moments of culture shock between the two institutions? Did they ever suddenly become aware of something that was so strange for their cultures like that?
Ask your question again, please.
Yeah, were there any moments of culture shock, or where they realised that the way we're doing one things in one country is so different to the way they're doing things in the other? And was that the aim, and was that the value?
I'm not sure if it was culture shock or communication shock, which could be a form of culture shock. One of the challenges that as educators, both myself, Dr. Baha, and Dr. Wilson noticed was when it came to voice over internet protocol, or what we call Skype. Many people around the world use Skype as a means to communicate and speak to each other, and just as many use it as a means to communicate, to speak to each other, and see each other. And a unique challenge that we noticed amongst our students was, especially on the Japanese side, where communication is more mobile phone oriented. So you can speak on a mobile phone and not be concerned about what you look like. You do not have that luxury when you're using video Skype. You are on a screen, you're conscious of what you look like, and you're conscious of your own ability to communicate in language. So, and we also noticed it on the American side. One comment that came up in student evaluations on the Japanese side was, it's difficult to communicate face-to-face with someone you don't know. And that, I think, helped the educators recognize that maybe we can do a little bit more scaffolding to prepare students and how to be successful in this form of communication. Another example of communication shock, I guess we can call it that, or cultural communication shock, is, and I mentioned this in our presentation, is deer in headlight syndrome, where it's so exciting to be real time on a video looking at, in our case, there's a 17-hour time difference. So in the United States, it was Thursday around 7 p.m. and in Japan, synchronistically at the same time, it was 11:30 in the morning the next day. So these students are kind of mesmerized at the idea of seeing other students in another country real time, and they became speechless. And so as educators, we had to be aware of that and push and prod and encourage dialogue, because we only had so much time.
What was the value for you as a teacher? I mean, what did you learn?
That's a long list. Let's see. One thing I learned was that through these types of interactions, there are going to be things that pop up that you didn't anticipate. One of those things was a serious topic. One serious topic that came up was teenage pregnancy. And this just occurred after, on the third synchronous session, a student on the United States side wanted to know if they could ask a more serious topic. And it was an opportunity for me to check in with my students to make sure that was something that was acceptable. And it was. And then, there were questions asked about teenage pregnancy. Do you know someone who is a teenager and that they're pregnant? Or do you know someone who's a teenager and they've conceived a child? And it was quite surprising, because I didn't think, that's not something that's in mainstream media in Japan with NHK, the National Broadcasting Company. It's not something that's over the newspapers very much. And yet 2 or 3 students came up to the video and the microphone and said, yes, I have friends who had a baby. Yes, I know someone. And some of the discrimination that comes with that. So that was something that happened. It was a serious topic. Another thing, there was an impromptu fashion show. So students they had a little bit of free time where they could say whatever it was they wanted to, and I showed this in the presentation. There's a group of about 7 students standing in front of the camera, and one student has taken off his shoe, and he's showing the students on Japan the brand shoe that he has and the clothing that they're wearing, and they were able to have this very casual dialogue about, oh yeah, this sweater is $100 and shock. You paid $100 for a sweater. So these things just kind of naturally happened, and I guess that was something that I learned, that given the right environment, given the right atmosphere, given the proper tools to communicate internationally, youth are going to do what they do naturally.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, now, I mean, you've really caught my interest on this one. I would very much like to actually set something up like this between Greece and Japan with second language learners. What advice have you got?
First of all, I think it's good to use a venue like this, which is a way for teachers to collaborate, to find out what's happening at your institution now, find out, are there teachers using, are there teachers teaching a web-based course now, find out who they are. As my uncle would say, you need to want to. So see if there are teachers who are wanting to do this. I probably would be wise to advise that it takes a lot of preparation to teach such a course. You have to be thinking about the needs and the goals and the objectives of the students on the Greece side. You have to be thinking about the needs and the goals and objectives on the students on the Japanese side or whatever other country. You have to think about how you're going to set up the course. Yeah, so quite a bit. And then you have to think about the tools that you need. In many cases, you'll need a computer, and you'll need to be aware of the bandwidth or the capabilities of the computer. I think it's also important to have administrative support. We were fortunate in the sense that our dean of students in Japan made a trip to San Jose State, and this is something that they were on board. They really wanted it to happen. Dr. Wilson came to Japan, Kwansei Gakuin, in 2009, I believe it was. 1 year later, the two universities had merged into agreement with the goal, hopefully in the future, of having students on either short or long-term stays. So having administrative support is, I believe, initial and significant from the beginning. Technical support. Mark Adams at San Jose State made a trip to, it was just his natural desire to go to Japan for a holiday. So he and his wife came to Japan, and in the process he came by our university, and he was able to look at our system to see if it would be possible. And he was also responsible for he and his staff were responsible for getting all of my students signed up with a learning management system called Desire to Learn. So that way the students on both sides were in a joint course, and only those students who were in the course were allowed to interact on the site. And that helps to keep only those students who are in the site and not have outsiders invading into the course.
So you were able to moderate the
yes.
in that way. Well, that's some really good advice. And John, unfortunately, that is all we're going to have time for.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
It's
for
my pleasure.
to me. That was fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.